Hello, must readers. My name is Erin Popelka. I curate must read fiction, a place for people who know that life is better with a novel in hand. And I am so delighted to be here today with Jessica Strawser. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. So, Jessica Strawser is an editor at large at Writer's Digest magazine. Her debut novel, Almost Missed You, came out in March 2017. And her second novel, Not That I Could Tell, oh, Almost Missed You, so beautiful. And her second novel, Not That I Could Tell, beautiful there. Look at that gorgeous, hot off the press, not even off the press. It's coming out in
Not
March
even. Yeah.
2018. So, like early copy will come out in March 2018. She is a wife and mom in Cincinnati, Ohio. So congratulations on the publication of your debut novel last year and your second novel coming out in March. Where I would love to talk about both of those. Where would you like to start?
Wherever you want. And thank you. Thank you so much for having me. We can
Absolutely.
start at the beginning with the first one if you want to.
Perfect. Let's go there.
Okay. Do you want me to just kind of talk
Yeah,
about it?
no,
Summarize?
absolutely. Yeah, so tell me about the book.
Okay, so Almost Missed You this is a paperback that's not quite out yet. It comes out February 6th. It's out in hardcover and audio, ebook, every other format. And it's the story of a young couple that goes on their first family vacation with their young son. And the wife and mom, Violet, goes down to the beach and she's kind of having her happy moment with her book and her pina colada, and her son has taken or her husband has taken their son up to the hotel room for his nap to kind of give her some me time. And she goes back up to the hotel room when she's done and they're gone. They've packed up all their stuff. Her husband has completely absconded in the middle of her family vacation and taken their child with him, and she has completely blindsided and has no idea why. And this was a couple who everyone thought was just meant to be, a perfect couple with kind of a crazy tangled story of how they'd even gotten together in the first place after, years and years of missed connections. And so the story kind of backs up from there to kind of ask, well, was anything about this situation, what anybody thought it was from the start?
Oh, fascinating. So it gets really interesting kind of right from the beginning, sort of as we get under the surface. Absolutely. So that's, some big questions and some big questions about marriage and some big questions about family and some big questions about what is happening that no one can see, sometimes even ourselves. Where did that idea come from?
I've always been fascinated by just the idea of fate and the concept of what's meant to be, but all the surrounding concepts too, like if there's such a thing as the one and the one that got away and things like that. And more than being fascinated by those concepts, I think I'm just fascinated that everybody is so fascinated by them. I feel like we put a lot of stock, whether we realize it or not, in our language, in our media, and everything, in kind of those concepts. I think most people, even if they might say, well, I don't know if I really believe in fate, like maybe they do, So I kind of wanted to play with that concept of fate and take a couple who everyone believes is fated to be together and kind of, not in a cynical way by any means, but just kind of call that into question. The whole idea of it. So I actually kind of started with the concept of playing with that idea even more so than with the plot, and then sort of backed up from there and ended up developing the story, which, as I was writing it, the story alternates perspectives between three characters. It's both halves of the couple and then a mutual friend who ends up getting kind of pulled into their turmoil. And it jumps back and forth in time too. And so it all kind of comes together like a puzzle. And when I was writing it, I had no idea how it was going to come together at the end. So it was a surprise that it did.
Sure.
But yeah, it was just a lot of fun kind of playing with all of the possibilities. And I think there were actually a number of ways that it could have gone. So it was fun to write, and, I hope fun to read, and maybe the sort of book that would kind of get people thinking.
Absolutely. So did you have a couple different endings that you were sort of playing with as you were developing it?
I really didn't know how it was going to end until probably about halfway through. And once I hit on the ending, once I decided then on how I thought it should end, nothing else made as much sense to me. So, but yeah, for at least half of the book, I wasn't actually sure how it was going to end, which was kind of harrowing.
But also keeping you on your toes too. Yes, yes. And you are never bored, right? Moving along and figuring out how it was going to go. Absolutely.
That's the downside of not being an outliner. You always write with a certain element of fear.
And a certain element of like, where could this go? And excitement.
Yes, excitement, but also hopefully this is going somewhere and it's going to come together here. So.
Sure. And
it's
let's
kind of
talk
when the characters take over and then that actually works out.
Indeed. And it's always good when the characters take over, when it does work out, because sometimes they can take over and send things on crazy turns that break everything else. So yes.
Right.
Yep. And how was that a similar journey to your second novel, Not That I Could Tell? Or does that one have its own origin story and its own process for you for writing it?
I think I enjoy writing from kind of some central questions. So, and Not That I Could Tell, it was similar in that I think I had the idea for some of the central questions that the characters would face in the book, more so than any particular character or plot at the beginning. But what was different, and Not That I Could Tell also alternates with 3 perspectives, but it does not jump back and forth in time. So it's told, in a linear fashion, in order, just from different perspectives. But with that one, I did know the end when I started. There's a kind of a significant twist at the end of the book, and so I think it would have been really difficult to pull that off without knowing what it was going to be, the whole time. So in that case, I didn't know what was going to happen between the beginning and the end, but I knew where I was trying to go with it. So same approach in that I don't really outline before I write, but with that it was much different because I was going toward, a definitive point on the horizon.
Absolutely. So can you tell our must readers just a little bit more about Not That I Could Tell? Tell us what it's about.
Yeah. So Not That I Could Tell is a story of a group of neighborhood women. They live in a small town, and they're neighbors and they're friends. They're pretty friendly as far as neighbors go, but they're not necessarily close friends, but they're close enough that they feel like they know their neighbors well enough. And one night they have kind of a girls' night in the backyard. One of the women, her husband has built a new patio and fire pit, and they realize that all of their baby monitors can reach to this fire pit. So they have a girls' night in the backyard with a bunch of bottles of wine, get a little bit carried away. None of them remember it super well the next day, and then one of the women turns up missing at the end of the weekend. And so it turns out they were the last people to see her, and they're not very good witnesses either.
Right.
So they're kind of all thrust into, the scrutiny of this investigation. But then they're all also, dealing with their own lives and subplots. So the story is told from the very different points of view of 2 different neighbor women who live next door to this missing woman. And then you get glimpses from the missing woman in just the tiny little chapters sprinkled throughout the book as well.
Sure. And these are 2 very distinct novels. They are not connected. So they're both standalone novels. Yes. Oh, very interesting. And so I imagine that like kind of learning all of the characters, that's a big group of neighborhood women. So you're telling the story from 3 perspectives, but how many characters do you really kind of follow as the story progresses?
That's a good question. Not That I Could Tell is kind of more of an ensemble cast, I think, because even though it's only 3 perspectives, there was a group of women. There's I guess altogether 6 of them. So it was more of an ensemble cast, and it's also, it's in a small town. Almost Missed You is set in Cincinnati, where I live, but then parts of it also take place, on the beach in Florida, and the couple has relocated at one point in time to Asheville, North Carolina. So the story kind of jumps around in place as well as in time, even though most of it is set in Cincinnati. But with Not That I Could Tell, I really wanted it to be kind of a closed, intimate environment where something like this would have a ripple effect through the town. You know, some towns, I don't know that a missing person would really register. Certainly in your own neighborhood it would, but I don't know that it would have, you know, the same ripple effect that it would in a small town. So Not That I Could Tell is set in Yellow Springs, Ohio, which is a small town about an hour outside of Cincinnati, and it's an eclectic little town where Antioch College is, and you know, a couple of the characters work there. So I love it in Yellow Springs, and it was a really fun place to get to kind of live in my head for a year.
Yes.
And a fun place to set an ensemble cast because they're all, you know, interacting with each other quite a bit.
Yep, absolutely. And with both of these novels, you take a very accessible moment, you know, so for Almost Missed You, it's this family with a small son going on vacation. And you can almost like, even just with the premise of that, you can like feel the relief, like, oh, we get a break. This is going to be our thing. And then it goes awry, you know, and same with Not That I Could Tell. You have this moment with, you know, this group of women, we like the baby monitors reaching, you know, it's just that magical place. You know, I don't have children, but have definitely friends who have children, you know, where the like getting a neighbor to watch the baby monitor so that you can go to the grocery store or whatever is definitely like a lifesaver. So that moment of like, okay, the kids are okay, we've got the monitors, and now we can have a glass of wine and just walk home and not worry about it. And for then that to turn on its head, you know, the next day. So really interesting way to sort of like pull the readers in, and now here we go.
Yeah, I think I don't know, especially with Almost Missed You, as a parent, a lot of people would say to me like, oh my gosh, that's such a worst nightmare scenario, you know. And I think it is because, you know, when we say that something's like our worst nightmare, that kind of means that we've imagined something like that before, you know. It's not necessarily that this specific instance that happens in this book. It's not like I've been on vacation like, gosh, I hope my husband's still going to be up in the hotel room when I get up there. But just the idea of, you know, not being able to get to your child, or not knowing where your child is, or, you know, having something really disturbing maybe going on in your own neighborhood that you're not aware of. I think those are the kinds of things that, you know, I don't write, my books definitely have a strong element of suspense, but I wouldn't call them thrillers. You know, they're more kind of like domestic dramas with a strong suspense element. But I think there is that kind of relatable, it's not writing about some far out anomaly serial killer kind of situation. It's just that relatable, you know, kind of heart-stopping moment that I think is a good way to begin a story. And it's what I like as a reader, I think, that kind of draws me in. So I think that's just what I'm drawn to write about as well.
Yep. Another writer who is really great at drawing sort of like a normal scene and then turning it on its head is Stephen King, who I know that you have also interviewed through your work with Writer's Digest. And so I want to take a moment and talk to you about, you know, serving as editor for Writer's Digest magazine. You have also done interviews with authors. So, you know, full confession, I feel more than a little bit excited and nervous to be interviewing the interviewer. I wondered if you could talk to me about some interviews you've done with authors and any memorable moments or great advice that you got along the way.
Oh my gosh. I mean, so much great advice that I've gotten along the way. Definitely my favorite, you know, I was at the helm of Writer's Digest for about 10 years, and I had been a junior staffer before that. And hands down, my favorite part of my job was getting to interview, you know, so many of these authors who I've admired my entire life. And I think, you know, if you're harboring any kind of desire to write at all, when you talk to enough of them, I think just what jumps out at you isn't even necessarily any one piece of advice. It's just that they're just regular people, you know? I mean, we kind of have them up on this pedestal, and then, you know, you kind of talk to them on the phone and you get to joking around, and they're just regular people, and it makes the whole thing seem just less mysterious, I think, and, you know, just more attainable. But it is amazing how many best-selling authors too will take the time to offer, encouragement to younger writers, or when you express the situation that you're in or relate to something that they're saying. I've had people, Debbie Makemer is a great example. I was talking with her, and at one point indicated that I was also, because when she started writing, her children were very young and they were home with her, and I kind of related and said, oh yeah, I can relate. She was talking about having to write with background noise going on and not being able to be precious about your writing space, and I told her, oh, I can relate, I have 2 little ones at home. And she kind of stopped the interview and said, well, how young are your kids? And she was like, Jessica, I really want you to know that when if you don't feel that you're taking time away from them by pursuing your writing, she was like, my children are grown now, and they've come to me and said, she said, I always felt guilty when I was trying to pursue my writing and my children were young. I always felt guilty about the time that I spent away from them. But I've had my grown children now come to me and say, Mom, you showed me what you can achieve by following a dream. You showed me that if you work hard at something that you really want, you can succeed. And she was, and I hadn't expressed any insecurities, but I was completely feeling all of those insecurities. And she just took the time to just say, keep on keeping on, and it's going to be fine. It's going to be great. And so I think just those human moments, even more than writing advice, are what stands out to me from, interviewing so many of those writers, and the fact that they're, by and large, for the most part, just warm and encouraging, funny, friendly, nice people.
Yes.
Because, I don't know, it just makes the whole thing seem much more doable. And I admire most of the writers that I interviewed so very much.
Yeah. And what's wonderful about writing is that no matter how far you've come in your career, there's something incredibly humbling about you still have to tell a good story. You still have to understand your characters. You still have to draw them in a convincing and authentic way. And even if you've done that for 20 novels, it's still new every time. And so I think so writers by their nature are really human and kind of steeped in humanity, because we are trying to really express the human condition through our stories. And so I think that's a wonderful lesson to take away from many interviews. That's great.
Yeah, I also think, I don't know, it's just like, what do you want to hear at that point? Because you're absolutely right. And if you're talking to somebody who's written, 15 or 20 books, you almost want them to tell you that it's going to get easier. And
Yes.
It's like nuts. Oh no.
Right. And maybe you get kind
it's also very relatable. Like, okay, I'm not the only one floundering here. The floundering is part of the process. You just need to embrace the floundering, I guess.
Right. Indeed. The struggle is part of the process and part of the condition. And the sooner you accept that, the better it gets, right?
I guess so.
Yes. And so I want to talk a little bit about your path to writing fiction. So I know that you studied journalism in college, which is still writing, but is a very different skill than writing fiction. Did you always write fiction along the way? Did you start in journalism and move towards fiction? Talk to me about that process.
I wrote a lot of fiction as a child, and maybe even as a teenager a little bit. It's funny because and now that I'm publishing books, people who've been family friends will, come out to a sign. I'll go back to my hometown in Pittsburgh, and old family friends will come out to a signing and be like, oh my gosh, I remember when you were a kid, you always had this little notebook. And to them, it just makes so much sense. But I definitely had moved away from that. I think I was so, I always read fiction first and foremost. I mean, even when I was a magazine editor, it wasn't necessarily a tower of magazines on my nightstand. It was always novels,
Yeah.
But I think I'm a pretty practical minded person, and journalism just seemed like at the time anyway, like a safer, salaried job, a straighter path that I could pursue. And I was very happy, doing that for a long time. And I really only left because it became too much to juggle both things and my family at the same time. And I am still very much involved at Writer's Digest, though I'm not, a full-time staffer anymore. But I think it was that I landed at Writer's Digest and that I was spending so much time, interviewing authors and working with authors who I really admired, but then also editing articles on how to write novels, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never enrolled in a fiction writing program. I never took a fiction writing class in college, but I have read every article in every issue of Writer's Digest probably 4 or 5 times over the past decade. And that is a great course. I mean, you can absolutely self-taught. So you're kind of steeped in all of this. And I think if you already have even a little bit of the writing bug, it would be almost impossible not to, at some point try it yourself. But when I first started, I was very conscious of the fact that did seem very outside of my role. And I was doing certainly creative nonfiction writing, not just journalism. I had an essay in the New York Times several years ago, and I would contribute to blogs now and then, but the fiction writing seemed something that was very outside of what people knew me for, and I was nervous that I wouldn't be, very good at it, and that I might be laughed off the stage if I tried to put myself out there. So when I first started doing it, it was for the first several years I was just doing it in the closet. Nobody really knew that I was doing it. So it was kind of a very tentative shift.
Sure. And sometimes it's almost safer that way too, right? Because it's, that you want to do it. It's your own time. So it's okay to get up early or stay late after, the kids are in bed, to do that private thing and be like, well, if nothing comes of this, it's okay. I'm just going to give it a try. There's no stakes. And sometimes that's a beautiful place because it gives you permission to fail. And sometimes you need that because you don't know if anything's going to come of it. And really it's just, and it's just that passion that you need to just give it a try. So I think that's a beautiful thing too, and so exciting that now that has come for you to be really public and for these books to come out.
It was a gradual, there was definitely a moment where I realized, gosh, I wrote a novel and I revised it and maybe I should try to submit it, where there's just a moment where you kind of just have to go to, oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Just have to go to the end of the cliff and put yourself out there. So yeah, it was kind of a memorable leap, but honestly, I think I should have done it earlier than I did. I think having, the support of other writers who are at a similar stage that you are is an invaluable thing. And I wish I hadn't been in the closet for so long. I now so much more enjoy, the writing communities that I participate in online and the other writers I've connected with through that. And I definitely think I would encourage others to not be tentative and not be scared about it, and don't do what I did. Don't do it.
or in a sense to take your own advice, because Writer's Digest is one of those really wonderfully warm, incredibly welcoming, incredibly supportive places where truly we all have stories that we want to tell, and Writer's Digest gives such fantastic tools to make it happen. So so in a sense you almost have to pause and be like, oh, look at this article I wrote 2 years ago. Maybe I should take my own advice.
I know. Absolutely. Always easier said than done. I mean, I was also in a unique position where, I felt like there was a weight to putting myself out. I don't know that as the editor of Writer's Digest, I could have just nonchalantly joined a Facebook group of aspiring writers that,
right.
I would have been an alias or something. So, they might not have wanted me there, So yeah, it was a unique situation that I was in. But, anyone who's feeling any hesitation, I would say just go for it. And, early on, if someone had asked me how important it was to have, a tribe of fellow writers in your life, I would have probably rated it as, I don't know, it sounds like a good idea, maybe like a 3 or a 4 on a scale of 1 to 10. But now I would absolutely say 10. It's so important. You really need, so, and the sooner you can, kind of work toward that, I think the more benefit you'll get from it.
Yep. Oh, fantastic. And so my last question, I know you are a mom of young children. And so how do you weave in reading and writing and parenting, with your kids and, kind of raising your kids around words?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. They're a little young to be writing because they're 4 and 6. So I have a preschooler and a kindergartner right now.
Sure.
But reading is a huge, huge part of my parenting and just of our everyday life. Every single night, we read bedtime stories before bed, and I feel like it's a great equalizer in your day, even if it's one of those nights where the kids have been squabbling, aren't getting along well, are literally pulling each other's hair, and you're like, that's it, we're getting our pajamas on, we're going up to bed early, we'll just read 4 books tonight instead of 2, and it's my favorite moment in every day when everybody, curls up together and reads the stories. But my son is learning to read right now, which is really fun. So he's at a stage in his kindergarten where they get a picture book sent home, and then once they're proficient at reading it themselves, we send it back, and then they get a new one, and he has a reading log. So that has been super fun to kind of watch him, experience that on his own. But I've also, even though they're a little young to understand, I made sure to include the kids as much as I could in all the activities surrounding my book launch last spring. So I was calling them my little roadies, my road crew
I
at the
love
time.
it.
And I didn't go on an extensive tour by any means, but we live in Cincinnati, and I did events here, and then I did some in Pittsburgh where I'm from, and some in Columbus, which is kind of in between. And I included them as much as I could. And you could really see that I think they really got it, and they could sense the excitement of people who came out to see me. And so it was a really cool thing. I'm really glad, now that we're working around the school schedule, I won't be able to bring them to as much with book 2, but it was a really cool thing to get to kind of see them experience it. And even though it's kind of an adult thing to bring at the time they were 3 and 5, to bring a 3-year-old to a book signing in a bookstore, they were great. And they were completely on board. And so I loved being able to share that with my family, and, hopefully that will have an impact on them moving forward, whatever they decide to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if nothing else, modeling for them, this is what it looks like to chase your dreams. And this is what it looks like
Yes.
to imagine something and create something and bring it into the world. So what a beautiful process to include them in.
Yeah, and to, support the people you love who are pursuing things that they love too. That's something that we make a point of doing. I mean, even in my own neighborhood, there's a really talented mom across the street from me who started her own Etsy shop and does her own t-shirt designs. And I make sure to, order some things from her. And we have a stand-up comic in our neighborhood. And when he did a local open mic, we went to see him. And I think
Awesome.
it's a nice thing to support people, who are pursuing cool things that they like. So I think that's a good thing to model as well.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we as must-read fiction readers are so excited to support you and your writing, and Almost Missed You and Not That I Could Tell. Congratulations on the 2 books that you have, one in the world, one coming out in March. And thank you so very much for talking with me today, Jessica Strawser. This was just delightful.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.